Taxi drivers at war with Uber, Apple at war with the FBI, and the Canadian Parliament at war with logic. It's time for another podcast. Not quite live from Forget the Box Studios in Montreal. This is the FTB Podcast, the only podcast you're listening to right now. All right, let's meet our panel.
My name is Katie Nelson, and I am a student at Concordia.
I'm Gabriel. Sometimes I contribute on Forget the Box.
I am Enzo Sabbagha. I'm a music student and a technical assistant on the FTB podcast.
And I'm Jason C. McLean. I'm only here for my looks, your host for this evening. And we are the 21st of February, 2016. And tomorrow there's a very interesting resolution being debated in the Canadian Parliament. More on that a little bit later. Also, Apple has been fighting the FBI lately. We're going to see what that's all about. But right now, let's hear a little bit about what happened this week in Montreal with a protest of taxi drivers against Uber.
The Montreal Taxi Bureau is facing an ongoing fight against the city's Uber.
We have to make it clear to all taxi drivers that they are still working with Uber Taxi, that it's totally unacceptable to work with a company that is killing your business. We have to make it clear to the government and to the Minister of Transport that if Uber wants to get in, Uber has to pay. Uber has the money, they have to pay for the permits. They cannot simply come and steal our jobs for free.
According to CBC, Uber services cost users between 20 and 30% less than a standard cab fare. The recent competition with Uber and taxis has led to some upgrade in the city's taxi services, such as introducing stricter dress code and standardizing debit and credit options for all cars. While Uber remains technically illegal in Montreal, Mayor Denis Coderre stands behind Montreal taxi drivers.
Moi, ce que je demande au gouvernement ce matin, c'est une trêve. Je pense que là, on est rendu là. Ça prend une trêve pendant les travaux de la commission parlementaire et du côté de l'industrie du taxi, et que pendant toute cette période-là, UberX cesse ses activités.
Yeah, so things are heating up between taxi and Uber. Before we start talking about this, I just want to ask around the room, has anybody here ever rode in an Uber?
Yeah, I rode in an Uber once.
Yeah, I do.
I have too.
I have never rode in an Uber. I'm usually part of the BMW set. That's bus, metro, walk. And I take a taxi if I'm drunk and I happen to hail one, or if my friends are ever so kind and decide to take me, or they're going by my house because I live very central and they want to drop me off. I've just never had the urge to get an Uber. But Katie, you've taken an Uber, but I don't think you necessarily make a point of doing that on a regular basis.
Nope, I am very against Ubers. I am very pro-taxi.
And why are you very pro-taxi?
I feel like Ubers are, for lack of a better word, scabs, and scabbing against taxi drivers who otherwise use taxis and drive taxis as a way to make living.
Okay. You, on the other hand, Enzo, you do take Ubers and you enjoy taking Ubers.
Yeah, well, I'm also a bit like you. I mean, metro, bus, walk. But if I have to take a cab, I will always go for Uber. I'll never go for a taxi.
Why?
And just, I mean, from a customer point of view, for me it's much more convenient to go on this app, to call this cab, to make sure that I don't have to bother if I'm paying by card or by cash. And if I have people with me, we can just fare split it, and it's always way cheaper than taking a taxi. So that's, for me, that's why I always go for Uber.
Yeah, but Jerry, I mean, you have ridden in an Uber, but you take taxis more often, right?
Well, yeah, I don't have an Uber account. The only time I ever ride an Uber is with a friend who has Uber, and I'll just give him some money for it. But I kind of in the middle, sort of. I think taxis they have invested money for their cabs. It costs like $250,000 for one of these licenses. So to undercut them is unfair. The city, if the city allows Ubers, then it should refund all the money that it's taken from cabs, basically. So the city has to kind of make a decision. I think Uber has the technology that cabs can use to their advantage. So there can be some kind of middle ground, I think, that can be found. I don't know what exactly it is, but I'm sure there can be a middle ground found between Ubers and taxis.
Do you think there can be a middle ground, Katie?
No.
No?
No, I think that obviously there's progression in terms of technology and how people sell a business or how they give a service, but I think that the way that Uber has taken advantage of that technology is illegal, for one, and puts taxi drivers and other people at a disadvantage. So I think to find a middle ground would be to settle on this kind of free for all market as to who can do what and when and how.
Like, what if taxi drivers, instead of using dispatch, had an app?
Yeah, and a couple taxi companies do. They don't update it very well, and of course that's their fault. And I think that there's some catching up that they need to do, and I think that Uber is a good way to push them back into competition, but I don't think that Uber is necessary to exist for that to happen.
An interesting thing, because Uber, okay, is known as part of the quote-unquote sharing economy, right? Now, it's sort of I guess it follows in the line of ride shares, which I think are a completely different thing. But, for example, I remember like about 10 years ago, I was going to Ottawa, and I had booked a Craigslist rideshare for $15 to Ottawa from Barrie. I was a bit late getting to Barrie, and I ended up having to take a cab, and it cost me $18 to get from Mile End to Barrie, and then $15 to get from Barrie to Ottawa. And I thought that was a total difference. Is Uber actually part of a sharing economy, or is it something different?
No, I think, well, Uber when it first started out was along the idea of rideshare, and then it kind of grew from there, but I think that it's exploitative, especially if you look at New Year's Eve, for example, where people were getting $800, $900 bills. I think that they'd like to appear as a sharing sharing rideshare kind of idea, or sharing economy, but I don't think that they are in any capacity. I think that they're taking advantage of supply and demand, and that they're pretty capitalist in nature.
Yeah, I think what Katie pointed out is absolutely true. There's no regulations right now, apparently, for these guys.
Yeah,
they can charge whatever they want, and that you can't have that. Yeah. We can't have it with cell phones. We can't have it with our other bills. We shouldn't have it with Uber. There needs to be some kind of regulations made. Again, right now in Montreal, I think if Coder stands with the taxi companies,
he does very much,
which he does, right? I think that the taxi companies are in a good position in Montreal because they have a mayor that will stand up for them. But
how far does he want to be seen, like in the pocket of the taxi industry?
Like how far is he going to go? I don't know. Yeah. I think at some point they're going to have to let Uber, and there's going to have to be some kind of regulation and some kind of compensation to either the cabs or something that can be done that can kind of fix it.
Yeah, I think the problem is not that Uber is here and we should get rid of Uber. It's more dealing with why are we just making taxi drivers paying so much money to get the license nowadays, where there are apps like Uber and Lyft that is smaller but is going to grow eventually. So I think Uber, the thing about Uber is that Uber grew really fast and they didn't expect that. Today there's 300,000 Uber rides per month in Montreal. So that's a lot, and people didn't expect that, and taxi companies didn't expect that.
I heard in New York, Uber drivers are trying to unionize, which is kind of, I guess that's a good thing, but it's kind of like, I don't think you necessarily think that. I think you think that's kind of ironic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're not employees, first of all. Similar like taxi drivers, they have a union that represents them, but they're not unionized, so they're on contract. They're contracted workers, technically. So the fact that taxi drivers can't form their own real union other than having kind of like an ad hoc representative, I think it's a joke that Uber drivers are trying to unionize, and I'm very pro-union and pro-workers unite, whatever, communism. But I also think that it's kind of, it's ironic. They also get paid terribly on top of that, too. So Uber drivers get paid, I think it's like $4 an hour, really, on a good day.
Wow.
They don't get tips.
They have to supply their own vehicles and their own gas. And...
But they're also not paying an enormous license fee. Their cars aren't regularly checked up. They're not. I was talking to one taxi driver. Their car has to be checked, I think it's once every 6 months, and they get like a list of fees that they have to go out of pocket to fix, and it's just the smallest thing. So,
wow.
So at the same time,
one thing I find, do you think taxi drivers are handling this well, though, in terms of their tactics?
I don't think they are at all. They're just saying we're paying way too much money. Uber can't just come in and take all of our money. That's their main argument. Yeah. We should get rid of Uber. Whereas if you see continents like Australia, where in South Wales, the New South Wales, they had this law for Uber where what they did is they had a flat rate of $1 per Uber ride that goes to the government, and they use this to pay back the licenses of the taxi drivers, because they realize that at this point it doesn't make sense to have one company like Uber who's doesn't need to pay any permit, and then taxi companies who have to pay permits. So I think that could be a solution here.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking more about the tactics, the protest tactics that the taxi drivers are using. Do you think they're effective?
I think there's many different tactics that are going on. So I think that service improved, or at least, I mean, I take a taxi every day, and I find that service has improved a lot in terms of taxi drivers, and I think that's because they have competition now. I think that the last few protests we saw, so the road blockages and then taking parking spots downtown was brilliant. It pisses off a lot of people. It pissed me off when I needed a taxi to go to work, but it was a good way to, I guess, grab the attention of the mayor and the province and provincial government. I think that their tactics of finding Uber cars and blocking them is brilliant. But I'm also
you enjoy
anarchist. So
yes, so you're
like anything chaotic is great for me.
Tactics after your own heart, sort of.
But no, I think it's great. I think the what you mentioned, Enzo, in terms of paying $1 back to the government so the government can pay taxi drivers, I don't think it's fair. I still don't think it's an equal, I guess, level or playing field, especially when they're paying. So say they do 5 rides a day at $1 each. I mean, it doesn't equate to what taxi drivers are paying every year and paying every month and every 6 months. Like, they're constantly bombarded with fees. And
yeah, well, one thing
that doesn't seem fair.
It's an interesting story.
It's definitely not fair. There's a double standard. I think for tactics, it works. I hate to say it, because the blocking of people going to the airport, that pissed off so many people.
Yeah,
think about it.
That did.
Did it work in their favor? It doesn't matter, because the government took notice of it, and they're like, we're already pissed off that Uber's not paying us tax money, right?
And,
which is what.
Yeah. So they weren't playing to people like you and me or people trying to go to the airport. They were playing to officials.
Yeah.
What I'm
worried, I just hope that we don't stay in kind of a shade of gray area where, like, oh, it might be right, it might not be wrong, we're not going to touch it, kind of like they did with vaporizers for forever until maybe recently. Like, that needs to be resolved now. You have to make a decision. Because, like in Edmonton, they made a decision. They're like, okay, we're going to allow Ubers. Okay, now give the cabs money back to the cabbies. Give them back their whatever they invested in. Because there's no way you should allow them to pay that amount of money and allow Uber at the same time. That's the problem, I think.
Yeah,
that has to be addressed. Yeah.
One thing that I find interesting too, this just came out when we're recording this. We're recording this on Sunday evening. When you hear this on Wednesday, the story might be developed. But there was, and this is obviously nothing to do with the actual contest between Uber and taxi, but it does relate to Uber in a way. Last night in Kalamazoo, Michigan, there was a spree killer. Very random targets, no gender, race specific, anything like that. And he was an Uber driver. And apparently, again, this is not 100% confirmed, but apparently he was actually picking up fares in the middle of his spree. Like, he would kill somebody, drive around, pick up a fare, drop them off, not kill them, continue and continue on his spree. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, I'll admit, but does that say anything about the pressure that Uber drivers are under, that somebody could be in the middle of a killing spree and still not want to have a bad Uber rating? I mean, am I out to lunch when I say something like that? Am I stretching a little bit?
I don't know.
I don't know. We should find out more about this case. I really want to know about it.
We should find out.
But I think, like, yes, the Uber rating is really important. And the time I've been in Uber, my friend uses it all the time. He tells me generally that he feels safer in Uber. And for some reason, it's like the Uber guy doesn't want his rating to go down, and that stops him from doing anything kind of shady. Yeah. I don't know if you agree with him or not, but that sounds kind of like
safety.
That sounds good for safety, because it's true. When you get in a cab, I've heard many stories where women are, sexually not assaulted, but there's sometimes there is assault in a cab. It's happened a couple of times.
I think it's important to contextualize, though, that taxis have been around forever, and so there's a long time period in which we can pull examples of violence from, whereas Uber has been around for a very short period of time. And there have been cases of Uber drivers doing something violent to somebody, just not as much as taxis, probably because they haven't existed the same amount of time. So I'm not quick to jump on the Uber safer yet bandwagon.
Yeah. Give it time, I guess.
Yeah.
You want to talk about safety, though. There was and horrible incidents and stuff. This is a bit of an interesting segue, but a number of months ago there was a horrible spree in California, and recently Apple has been at war with the FBI about that San Bernardino killer's iPhone. Let's listen to this.
And I'm saying I want Apple. First of all, Apple ought to give the security for that phone. Okay. What I think you ought to do is boycott Apple until such time as they give that security number. How do you like that? I just thought it. Boycott Apple. Here's the thing. First of all, the phone's not even owned by this young thug that killed all these people. The phone's owned by the government. Okay, not even his phone. We don't even have to go that far. But Tim Cook is looking to do a big number, probably to show how liberal he is. But Apple should give up. They should get the security. You'll find other people. When these two young people had bombs all over their apartment on the floor, other people saw those bombs. Well, those people, in a certain way, are almost as guilty as the ones that did the shooting. We got to get to the bottom of it. And you're not going to get to the bottom of it unless we use common sense. So I like the idea. Boycott Apple until such time as they give that information. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so that was a bit of levity there. Donald Trump, a man thinking we should boycott Apple, yet tweeting constantly from his cell phone, his iPhone, even not hiding the fact that he's tweeting from his iPhone. That's the ultimate of hypocrisy, but it's always good to have a laugh at Donald Trump's expense in these trying times we live in. But the story is basically that the FBI wants Apple to hack into, create a backdoor into the San Bernardino killer's iPhone. But not only do they want them to create a backdoor to get the information from that phone, they want them to create a procedure, which anybody could really get, to hack into people's phones. Now, Apple actually released a letter, and this is why Donald Trump's saying we should boycott, a letter to consumers saying they refuse to do it on privacy grounds. It's a step too far. People have suggested that maybe Apple should just under supervision, create it for this specific phone and then destroy the plan they had to get into the iPhone. But what I'm wondering is, Apple's not a company that's really known for privacy. And Apple, I mean, they're taking a big stand on this one, which I think is good. I don't think the FBI should have a backdoor into everybody's iPhone. Hackers can pick that up and they could steal your personal information. But is Apple really stretching it with this one? Considering that people could probably find ways into the FBI, like you were saying, the FBI could probably find a way into people's iPhones anyways.
Yeah, definitely. I think they could find it before, they can find it now, and they're going to be able to find it with or without the back door. But also the Apple letter, I think what they try to do there is to try to get people on their side by saying, no, we won't do, because they could have not just released this publicly and
done it, and nobody would know.
Yeah, exactly,
Except,
and done it because
yeah.
they, like you said, they're known for not really caring about privacy of their users.
Yeah.
So I think the whole situation is kind of funny.
I find this whole situation kind of suspicious. The FBI, or who probably has some connection to the NSA, probably can work together and get some information from Apple, because the NSA has information on everyone's cell phone probably.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm speculating here. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think this is all a show. Between two groups saying, oh, we don't have information. Do you have information? Oh, we don't have any information. And like that kind of exchange. And it's public.
So you think it's a PR stunt?
It's a PR stunt, yeah. That's my opinion.
I think it's a PR stunt, but on behalf of Apple, because terms and conditions, you sign away a lot of your personal information anyway. So they have it. They don't need a backdoor. They could give it if they wanted to. And to say, I guess, we're not creating a backdoor because we love our customers it's just so stupid, because they already have the backdoor themselves. Like, we already give them all of our information.
Yeah.
So to not give it to a third party, I just don't buy it.
Yeah. So we're not buying Apple, and I'm not buying our federal government lately.
Member from Regina, Louvain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I always enjoy hearing from the member for Thornhill. He has a tremendous eloquence, undoubtedly honed in his illustrious career in journalism. I assume that background has also given him respect for freedom of speech. The Conservatives have tried to argue in this House that free speech simply means that we as parliamentarians are free to condemn certain viewpoints. That's fine, but that's not what this motion is about. This motion calls upon the government to condemn individual Canadians for expressing certain viewpoints. And I wonder if the member for Thornhill would acknowledge that that's not what we do in a free society.
It's actually a motion that the Conservative Party, now in opposition, have put forward in Parliament. I'll read the text of it. That given Canada and Israel share a long history of friendship as well as economic and diplomatic relations, the House reject the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions BDS movement, which promotes the demonization and delegitimization of the State of Israel, and call upon the government to condemn any and all attempts by Canadian organizations, groups, or individuals to promote the BDS movement, both here at home and abroad. Now, this is typical Conservative messaging. It's also, there's no actual real legal thing attached to this. I mean, it is pretty much a toothless resolution. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's happening now is the Liberal Party, by the time this airs, the vote would have happened, but apparently tomorrow, Monday, the Liberal Party is going to vote with the Conservatives. and bring this into law, this condemnation mandate into law, and the NDP and the Greens, Elizabeth May, are going to vote against it. Now, there's a few issues this brings up. First of all, our government is actually using our tax money to debate something like this and bring about this resolution, which is basically don't they have other issues to fix in Parliament? But also the fact too is this clamps down on an incredibly effective tactic, which is the economic boycott, which is something that's very effective. Now, Katie, you've been involved with the BDS movement here at Concordia, right? How do you feel that the federal government is about to condemn you?
Well, they're not saying anything really when you read that. So they're condemning the demonization, I can't speak tonight. Yeah. Anyway, they're condemning it, but they're condemning it for the same reasons we're doing it. So we find Israel to be non-legitimate, and we find them to be a demonizable country and state. And so I just don't find that there's any meat to that. And maybe that's why it's not a legal motion, and it's just to condemn. It's really symbolic. But at the same time, like you said, there's numerous problems. So, for example, it's a protest tactic. So for a government to condemn something that's a protest tactic kind of starts to cross lines. It's a lot of speech as well. I don't want to say free speech just for the connotation of it, but student groups that are largely Muslim or largely from those areas who are protesting against the treatment of them and their families in those countries. So I think that that's another issue, is that there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement as to why this is happening, just the way that it makes Israel look. And then it also looks really political because they're an ally and they get along, and Canada has a long relationship and friendship with Israel. But I think the real issue here is making friendships and allies with other countries other than Israel, which we continue not to do, which is the reason why we have BDS, because Palestine's not recognized.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't want to use the word free speech, but I will use the words free speech specifically because a lot of right-wingers, especially conservative types, bring up that word all the time. They say, we're being censored, what about our free speech, this and that, and they use it so many times. Yet here they are basically clamping down on the same thing that they hold sacred. I mean, the hypocrisy is obvious.
Well, Jason, I think what Katie said is they're not really clamping down, because all they're doing is like kind of condemning citizens from boycotting something.
Yeah,
which is kind of ridiculous.
Which is,
I hate to say that is the ridiculous part of it.
That is absolutely.
But it's political for sure. They want to look like they're strong, and then they're with Israel, and that's what it's for. Really. Yeah. And I'm not even speaking on the issue, because I might have a different view on the issue than other people. You know, I might be pro-Israel, but I think you should be allowed to boycott anything you want. And I think it's just ridiculous to tell people, oh, we condemn you from boycotting this, even though you're against it. It's your cause. Yeah.
And in particular, though, Justin Trudeau jumping on board in the Liberal Party. I mean, I guess I kind of knew that they were always on board with this sort of thing. But I mean, it kind of shows there really, on some issues, there really is no difference between them and the Conservative Party.
Yeah,
well, no.
Yeah, just like this issue, for example.
On this issue, yeah. I mean, on some issues, yeah. There's some, like, for example, at least Justin Trudeau's trying to bring in some refugees. Not as many as he promised, but...
Yeah, I've never known the Liberal Party to be not pro-Israel.
Yeah.
Like, throughout their history. I've never...
Yeah, you're right.
I've actually, the only other person I've heard who wasn't pro-Israel is Joe Clark, and he was progressive conservative.
Yeah.
So that was the last person.
It's completely expected. It's completely expected. But, I mean... I guess, does anyone find it insulting that their government is spending time doing this sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, it's kind of different because I grew up in Lebanon my whole life until I was 18. So I experienced firsthand all the problems that caused. But I think that what Katie said is that there's nothing to this motion. They're just creating a motion that condemns boycotting something just to say, okay, let's not talk about this subject anymore. Let them do their thing over there. We have nothing to do with this, but we stand with Israel just because they're our allies. That's what they're saying. There's nothing to it. So I don't see why they're doing that.
What bugs me really though is some of the language calling it anti-Semitism, this and that. And it's clear that having a problem with the state of Israel, economically boycotting the state of Israel has nothing to do with the religion that a lot of people in that country happen to ascribe to. It's not anti-Semitism. It's simply a political protest against a pretty bad regime. I mean, Netanyahu should be arrested for war crimes, if you ask me. But I just find it insulting that kind of language is not being challenged in Parliament. I mean, I know Katie, I don't think you trust the government all that much. That's I'm not sorry to single you out there. I don't necessarily trust them either, but I think it's something that I find it just like so vile and insulting. And,
well, I mean, it's obviously politically motivated.
Yeah.
And that's just the reason behind it. What's interesting is watching the Liberals get kind of baited by the Conservatives in Parliament, to do stuff like, oh, do you not agree with this issue with us, or do you agree with it? And it's like, yeah, we do. And then you're starting to see the differences between the Liberals and the NDP every day, I find. Where the Liberals had to court a bunch of NDP supporters, and I would say a good percentage of NDP supporters are kind of more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel.
Yeah. Regardless of where their leader stands or their current leader stands.
So I think by the next election, things are going to change. If we keep seeing the Liberals kind of vote with the Conservatives on issues over time, it's
Yeah,
gonna be interesting.
and the only thing that has me,
even though this is not like for them, this wasn't a tabling like an actual motion of bill or something.
Yeah. The thing is, you take this and then you take the fact that C-51 is still on the books, and the other one of what was it, the second class citizens bill? I can't remember what that one was called.
I can't remember the exact word for it, but yeah, it like made a 2-tier class system or whatever.
Because you put this there, and then the Liberals said they were going to get rid of C-51, they were going to change C-51, but you realize that's there in law, and these other bills are still existing, and you see where they could ultimately go with something like this. And that's where I find, if they put the two and two together, and they start saying people who support BDS are terrorists, for example, and they apply those laws, they could get really, really horrible.
Yeah, I mean, Israel has the same kind of law, right? So a lot of Palestinians are second-class citizens in Israel, and same with Tunisians. A lot of different people who aren't Israeli-born aren't seen as equal citizens. So, I mean, I guess I see Canada being allies with Israel for that reason, because we're passing similar laws and we're becoming as draconian as Israel is. But I think at the end of the day, we need to acknowledge this for what it is it's meatless and it has nothing to it. And I think it's just a way to give ammunition to, like, for example, student groups who fight against BDS. Like McGill's having a BDS vote this coming week.
Tomorrow, I believe, right?
Tomorrow.
By the time you hear this, it will have already happened.
And about this McGill thing, last year the BDS movement tried to pass a motion at the SSMU, the Student Association of McGill, to recognize Israel as a state who's infringing human rights. Mm-hmm. And what they did is the people against BDS passed a sub-motion to postpone this motion indefinitely, and they won it. So they just wanted to say, okay, we don't want to talk about it. Let's all agree we won't talk about it. Yes, okay,
if BDS is to pass at McGill, will like Hillel be legal? For instance, on McGill.
BDS passed at Concordia.
It passed, and Hillel runs perfectly fine.
Yeah, it still exists. It's just, but one question though, is the university actually obliged to not have any dealings with Israel if the BDS motion passes?
Okay, so at Concordia it's a little bit different because we don't have a lot of investment in Israel in the first place. I mean, minus a few different things, and the school said that they don't agree with it for all these different reasons. But McGill has huge investment in Israel, like
sure. especially medical.
Yeah, tons of it. So it's like definitely the stakes are way higher at McGill, and I think that's why it's been like many years of trying to pass it and not going through. So the SMU has a lot of power on campus at McGill, I feel, much more than the CSU does here. So I think that it would be more of a lobbying issue once it passes, but if it does, it's huge.
Okay, around the table, and by the time people hear this podcast, it will have already passed or not. Do you think it's going to pass, Jerry, at McGill?
No, I don't think it will pass.
The BDS at McGill?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it will pass.
I think so, too. We're going to actually have some other predictions coming up, but first, let's listen to the community calendar.
Thursday at 7 p.m., join the Union Française de Montréal for a screening of Major, a documentary film exploring the life and campaigns of Miss Major Griffin Gracie, a formerly incarcerated Black transgender elder and activist who has been fighting for the rights of trans women of color for 4 years. The screening is a co-presentation between Aztec and the Prisoner Correspondence Project from Cooper, Concordia. That's Thursday, 7 p.m. Friday, February 25th at Bistro de Paris, join Groove Child Revolution and Keystorm for a night of alternative rock. Entrance is $7 for students and $10 general admission. The event promises to be a night of grooves and moves. That's February 25th at Bistro de Paris. Saturday at 5:30 at Caffeine marks the 4th session of the Clapback. The Clapback is a space to informally discuss a variety of topics from divisive political issues to pop culture. This week's session topic is honoring Black History Month with a discussion on POC love.
Okay, so it's time for predictions.
I think the Montreal Canadiens will win the Stanley Cup.
In the next 2 weeks?
In the next 2 weeks, yes. Okay. I predict that. And also, I predict that Bernie Sanders will come out as anonymous.
I'm predicting that Donald Trump will come out as a closeted communist.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, I predict that Anonymous is gonna hack into Apple's back door and just give us all the information we need.
Okay, well, I have two predictions. First of all, that in order to help Hillary Clinton out, Barack Obama is going to appoint Bernie Sanders to the Supreme Court. And my second prediction is that Mayor Denis Coderre will be caught on tape late at night taking an Uber and be forced out of office. Da, da, da. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for being part of this podcast. You can read some of us here on Forget the Box. You can read about Katie elsewhere, though not Wikipedia.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So thank you very much. We'll catch you in 2 weeks on the next FTB podcast. The FTB podcast by the Forget the Box Media Collective in Montreal was hosted by Jason C. McLean and produced by Hannah Besseau. For daily, unique, original content covering news, music, politics, arts, lifestyles, food, film, you name it, we've got it. Check out forgetthebox.net.